Hello everyone and welcome to The No Show. I'll be your host Nathan Orenstein and today I'm going to be reviewing Smile 2. Smile 2 is written and directed by Parker Finn and stars Naomi Scott, Rosemarie DeWitt, Miles Gutierrez-Riley, and Dylan Gelula. Pop star Sky Riley is trying to make her comeback a year after her struggle with addiction culminated in a terrible car accident that left her severely injured and her boyfriend dead. However, after witnessing a gruesome suicide, she becomes haunted by disturbing images of people smiling menacingly that put into question her entire reality. She's forced to live through this nightmare, as well as trying to keep up her public image and dealing with the stress of the upcoming tour. It is a sequel to 2022's Smile. Full disclaimer, Smile 2 is a direct sequel to Smile, taking place 6 days after the events of that film end. However, really the only scene that you might feel a bit out of the loop on is the intro scene. Everything else, story-wise, is pretty much unconnected, and any other details you need surrounding the whole Smile mythos, you're gonna get covered in this film as well. That being said, I'll take this moment to recommend the original Smile if you haven't already seen it, because honestly, that's one of the more underrated horror films of the past few years or so. Anyway, with that all out of the way, let's get into the review. With Smile, Parker Finn proved himself to be a horror director to keep an eye on, and with Smile 2, in my opinion at least, he has fully cemented himself as one of the most exciting active directors in the entire genre. Smile 2 opens with an incredibly impressive one-shot scene, and it was apparent that this was going to be a special movie, and it doesn't disappoint. While Smile laid the very strong groundwork for Parker Finn as a director, Smile 2 proves that he's able to build on that foundation and really push the horror genre forward. I think I legitimately got goosebumps like 4 different times while watching this, and as someone who watches a lot of horror movies, I can't tell you the last time that happened. The creepy smile thing admittedly only stretches so far, and if I'm being honest, it probably exhausted itself back in the first film, but Finn recognizes this, and he only uses it to add a bit of creepiness to an already scary film. I will say there are certainly more jump scares in this film than in the first one, but there's often an element to them that at least makes them a bit more creative than what you might get in a more standard horror movie, I guess. The first half of this film does rely on jump scares a bit more than you'd like, especially compared to like the actually scary scenes, but by the end of the film, I'd say the balance pretty much works itself out. Parker Finn even whips out the old body horror card a few times here, something he really only did maybe once in Smile, and he does it really well here. Ultimately, he's approaching the horror genre from a bunch of different angles, and he's proved himself to be really good at all of them. In a year that is absolutely stacked with horror films, Smile 2 is, in my opinion, the scariest one of all. As far as the actual story goes, this is also an improvement over the first film. The first Smile was a bit too on the nose for my taste, following a therapist who has to confront her own childhood trauma to deal with this nightmare scenario she finds herself in. In Smile 2, we're now following a massively famous pop star who isn't a mental health professional, who isn't dealing with childhood trauma, and who has no choice but to keep up her public image. It's a much more interesting setup in my opinion, with higher stakes and more nuance, and I found Sky Riley to be a much more likable protagonist too. She's of course dealing with her own guilt about her past addiction, her boyfriend's death, and other various things surrounding her fame, but I think the film presents all of this in a much more interesting way than it does in the first Smile. Naomi Scott also does a fantastic job portraying her, and she's able to really make Sky Riley a sympathetic character despite her very apparent flaws. The rest of the cast is fine, and their characters aren't really anything to get excited about either, but this really is Naomi Scott's movie to carry, and I think she does a great job of doing that. Really, my only main gripe with Smile 2 is that I think it takes a little bit too long to really find its footing. Like I said earlier, the intro scene is a real highlight, and the gruesome suicide I mentioned in the intro is also a very strong scene, but other than that, the first half is kinda just okay in my opinion. We're learning who Sky is, what her past is all about, and we're seeing her just start to navigate these horrifying images that will haunt her for the rest of the movie. It's all solid enough, but it's not really doing much of anything to differentiate itself from the first film, or even from other horror contemporaries. The scares are also notably weaker in the first half, and the story just also doesn't have much urgency to it here either. However, at about the halfway point, Smile 2 kicks it into overdrive and never looks back. The The story becomes much more interesting, the presentation of its themes becomes much more impactful, and most importantly, the scares are dialed up to 11. This is going to sound crazy, but honestly, the second hour of Smile 2 is one of the single greatest continuous hours I've ever seen in any horror film. There are some questionable story bits here, as there are in most horror movies, but I was able to look past most of that just to fully appreciate how incredibly this works as a pure horror movie. I will note, though, there are some of the most unintentionally hilarious product placement I've ever seen in this movie, so hopefully that doesn't take you too far out of the immersion. It's October, and Smile 2 is almost certainly the best horror movie you're going to get this month, so that should be reason enough to go out and see it this Halloween or whatever. But seriously, if you look back at the year as a whole, this is one of the best films, period, of the entire year, and one of the scariest movies I've seen in the past few years or so. Parker Finn's approach to the horror genre is a breath of fresh air while still feeling right at home in the mainstream, and honestly, that blend makes this a must-watch for pretty much any horror fan. I'm going to be giving Smile 2 an 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed the review, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. And if you've already seen Smile 2, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I've been Nathan Orenstein with The No Show. Thanks for watching.